Hey. All right. So for like the past 3 days, I've been listening to recordings of old time radio because I'm weird like that. um, Actually, I grew up listening to some of these old time radio shows. Um, I don't. If you ever watched, which you'd be weird not to be watching it, but if you ever saw, oh, now I'm totally blanking on it. A Christmas Story and his favorite radio show, uh, Little Orphan Annie, and that's basically what old time radio was. It wasn't just music or sports or news. There were radio shows that had like celebrities, and they had actual shows. There were like detective shows, science fiction shows, like Buck Rogers started off on the radio like back in the 30s. It didn't start in the, I think the starting point for a lot of people is like in the 70s. It started in the 30s. I think actually it started in the 20s. I think that's when it started. But yeah, people like the Marx Brothers, Bing Crosby. Oh, I was so mad because I found like this record, the vinyl record in a secondhand store, and it was Bing Crosby radio show. I didn't have enough money to get it. I had like I had less than $2 to buy it, and I was just $2 off of getting it, and I was just like, damn it. Because I didn't know he had a radio show, but he had a radio show. Bob Hope had a radio show. Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis had a radio show. And Red Skelton had a radio show. And a lot of these radio shows moved on to television. So, like in the 30s and 40s, there was the way to make the connection is, in like silent film, there was the transition from silent to talkie. Well, then you had the radio, where radio made the transition into television. So there were a lot of these actors, the radio actors who just they didn't make it. Because they were successful on radio, and then as soon as television, because their show just wasn't doing it, so that's too bad. But I have, actually, this is my mom's. I keep stealing it. But I have like this, and it has, there we go, we'll get Chico in there. And it's four sides. It's 2 discs and then 4 sides. I've been listening to this since I was really, really little. And, of course, now that I'm an adult, some of the jokes makes more sense. Of course, I kind of understood a lot of them, but I think that's more of a generation thing, Your parents, and I don't mean to insult anybody, but yeah, my parents, it could be my family too. My parents just explained a lot of stuff to me, so, and my grandparents did too. It was just one of those things. And of course, the Marx Brothers, their jokes are pretty much, it's not one of those that are, but yeah, so there's them, the Marx Brothers, and there's a few I put some scratches on. But the volume 1, I've been trying to find volume 2 for a while. I would love to hear volume 2. And then, of course, Red Skelton. Red Skelton, he's also known for the clown paintings. He did that in the hobo thing, so if you don't know him for his comedy, you might know him for that. But he did a lot of pantomime once he got on, because I don't know if he was on vaudeville. A lot of the, like, Bob Hope was in vaudeville. I don't know so much. Fred Astaire was, but he didn't do radio. Bing Crosby, I don't know if he was. I don't think he was. I think he was strictly music, and then he went into acting. But yeah, with Red Skelton, when he went into, like I said, I don't know if he was into. He might have been. But he was a genius at what he did. If you ever get a chance, look him up. Look up Guzzler's Gin. That whole sketch is just hilarious. He also did a routine with Jerry Lewis, and that one's pretty good. And Jerry Lewis wanted to do a routine with Red Skelton, and they finally did one together, and it's fantastic. But when he had 2 TV shows. So, like, in the 50s, he had his TV show, and then it was canceled. And then in the 70s, he had a show as well. And then, of course, he was on the radio. Well, when he was on TV, you got to see a lot of his pantomiming. It was so much fun. And he's the one that had a bunch of different characters. He had, like, Clem Cadiddlehopper, and he had a Deadeye, and just a collection of characters. So, which just made it all the more fun to watch him. and he had him on the radio show as well. So he had the character, because he had a voice for every character, so it made it all the more. And then there was with the Marx Brothers, of course, and there's one of the recordings on this where Groucho is talking about how Harpo didn't come across very well. Well, Harpo's the one that would use the horns and the honking and everything, and there is one where you hear Harpo. You know, they're talking to Harpo, and you hear all these sound effects and everything. So it does drag a little bit, but then you hear him play the harp. So he wasn't on the radio as much. But there is I can never remember his name. I was listening to these discs that are the old time radio greatest comedies, and I can never remember. Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy. That was the show. And Edgar Bergen was the guy, and then he had his, he was a puppeteer. Or a ventriloquist. If I can say it. But they had the ventriloquist act on this old time radio show. and actually, they were in one of the Muppet movies when Jim Henson was alive, and I can't remember which one. I think it was the first one, Muppet Show. So when you see that old guy with the puppet on his lap, yeah, that's Edgar Bergen. and then of course the puppet is Charlie McCarthy. So that's a cameo. And but actually, because I was listening, I was like, how can that even work? And I'm listening to it, and it worked. with Harpo so much, you had to they basically had to talk around him and then finally have him play the harp and or something, and he did better on the big screen than anything else, which I absolutely love the Marx Brothers movies. Duck Soup, get uh, watch it. It is a fantastic movie. It is their best movie ever. I have some of their other movies. I'm trying to find their circus movie to just buy. I've never seen it. I'm just gonna buy it. And then of course I want their the big store. I want that movie and Out West. They did a Western movie, and I want that one too. So there's 3 movies that I want of theirs. I saw Out West like years ago, and I've been trying to find it. They put it out on DVD, but like the audio was screwed up in it. There were a bunch of movies that like in 2003, 2004 that were being released, and the audio was not connecting with the there were just a lot of tech. My Dumbo DVD was one of them. The movie runs fine, but there's like the special features don't work right, and it's like I'm lucky if I get to see the special features. But anyway, I'm just so like yeah, old time radio. I'm just a sucker for it. A lot of and with a lot of it, you get to hear the stuff that's going. Like the jokes. Some of them are very very time period. So like they're talking about the war, talking about the president, like President Truman is in office, and they talk about all this other stuff that's going on, and so it takes you back to what's going on then. And the other stuff is just extremely silly. And I love it. I love that I don't have to excuse me for sounding very old fashioned, but I love that I don't have to push through all of the um like sexual innuendo and all that stuff that is just seems to plague everything now. I don't want to hear about somebody's sex life. I don't want to hear about drugs and drinking and everything else, and it's like this kind of stuff is just it's clean fun. My throat has decided to be dry, so sorry if I'm and but the one thing that got to me, some of these radio shows you can find on YouTube, which is fantastic because as much as I love the stuff that I do have, it does get, it's like, okay, I don't want to listen to this again. Because, like I said, that record set I've been listening to since I was like, what, 7 years old? And so, yes, I do want to hear other stuff. So on YouTube, you can find a lot of the stuff like the science fiction stories, the horror stuff, and like the old detective, and the comedies and that sort of thing. Well, when you read the comments, a lot of people are like, I wish this was visual, and I'm like, then watch a movie. This was before TV ever existed. You do understand that, right? And I'm sorry for sounding rude, but that's what it is. Please understand why. This radio. Oh my goodness. Of course, when I was 13, I would probably be the same way. Because I wasn't exactly bright when I was 13. But I did understand the difference. I did know when TV wasn't around until about late 40s, mid 50s. I don't even. Seems like the 50s was when it came into creation. Yeah, TV hasn't always been around. And but yeah, I enjoy this entertainment better than some of the entertainment that's I've actually been listening to this old time radio stuff. I mean, yeah, you can see. I mean, it's like this huge thing right here. This collection. I sure hope you could see that. and and it's actually my parents. I snagged it, and like we went to get the comedies. We went to get another one. I think the detective one, gone, all gone. Haven't been able to get any more, and now it's like it's really hard to find them. Like I said, I find them on YouTube, and but yeah, I'm just wondering if I'm the only one that is extremely obsessed with old time radio. But oh, and the other thing, like I said, like Buck Rogers started, the Lone Ranger started as um a radio show. I actually used that in one of my books. It started in 1933. I decided to, in my book, The Jesse Edwards Adventure, because my grandpa and I always watched The Lone Ranger. He loved The Lone Ranger. And I had already decided on a year. It was going to be 1933. So I was researching The Lone Ranger to see, if I could use that somewhere in the book. And it turned out that The Lone Ranger, the radio show, had made its debut in June of 1933. I was like, oh, well, that works. So, yeah, The Lone Ranger and Buck Rogers. And Buck Rogers actually had a movie that same year, 1933, at the World's Fair in Chicago. So, and maybe that's what a lot of people are obsessing over. I'd have to look again. I'm not a huge Buck Rogers. I always think of Duck Dodgers. Oh, for heaven's sake. But and the other thing that I absolutely love about these old time radio shows is a lot of times they would promote musicians. Like in the Marx Brothers one, there's one of these that they're promoting this young girl, and because they a lot of times did live shows. Yeah, the shows were live, not in the studio. And oh, I can't find it. I'm not gonna worry about it. But and Chico and Groucho are talking about how this girl is their protege, and they're gonna help boost her career and everything. And she was like this opera singer, and the sound was absolutely beautiful. And Chico is setting the scene and giving everyone this orchestra, how the orchestra worked to play behind her. And it was absolutely wonderful. But also in these, like with some of the other ones, they introduce other musicians, and you get to hear as they're transitioning to something else, and it's just fun. And so yeah. That was and that's something that like my great grandma used to say, that she said one time, yeah, you guys have music, but you don't have enough music. And that's probably why you're not happy enough. I'm like, I thought I was happy. But it's true. I mean, yeah, we have music, but you don't see it very much. I mean, you don't hear it as much, you're not surrounded by it. And then listening to these old time radio things and everything, you realize just how much it's been pulled back. So So great grandma was right. So anyway, yeah. I'd kind of like to see some of these radio shows come back. Not, you know, I would, but at the same time I wouldn't, because if they were modernized, it would just kill it. Everything would have to be politically correct. Everything would have to be it would just destroy it. I mean, these are just so pure and innocent and fun and silly, and you can disagree with me all you want, but I really don't care. But they would be destroyed. I mean, this was during a time when nobody cared about anything. Well, I'm sure people did care, but they didn't throw a fit over it and weren't offended every 5 minutes, so. But yeah. Like I said, if you ever get a chance, look up some old-time radio shows. Groucho Marx. Well, not Groucho Marx, not just Groucho Marx. The Marx Brothers. Groucho Marx had a show. It was also on TV. It's called You Bet Your Life. It was on radio and it was on TV. And so you can look that up. Marx Brothers, Red Skelton. I don't know that Red Skelton's radio show would be on YouTube, but at least look it up. But look up his TV show. Because, yeah, just, he had a lot of big names on it, It was fun to watch him and some of these like him with John Wayne and everything else. And then, yeah, that Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy. Charlie McCarthy is the puppet, and of course, Edgar Bergen is the ventriloquist. And like I said, you wouldn't expect it to work on radio, but they made it work because they were on the radio for a long time. So, and they did a movie too. They were in a few movies. Of course, they were in a Muppet movie. Of course, everyone wanted to be in a Jim Henson movie. Everyone loved Jim Henson. But, I'm trying to think of some others. Oh! Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis had one. And there's actually, they had a special guest where Marilyn Monroe was their special guest. And that one's a lot of fun. I listened to that one, and so if you ever get a chance, at least look at that one. And then a movie recommendation would be Duck Soup, and that's a Marx Brothers movie. If you don't see any other Marx Brothers movie, at least watch that. At least watch it for so you can say, "Oh yeah, I saw it."